For this video I'm going to show how I make fingerless mittens using Tunisian crochet. Not these ones, but using a similar pattern. And I'm going to be using this yarn. Unfortunately I got given this, so I'm not quite sure what brand it is. But for this one I would normally use a 3.5mm hook. And because I'm doing Tunisian crochet you tend to need a slightly bigger hook. So I'm going to be using a 5mm hook for these gloves. For anybody unfamiliar with Tunisian crochet, this is a Tunisian crochet hook. I'm using a 5mm one, and as you can see, it looks like a cross between a knitting needle and a crochet hook. Now if you are completely new to Tunisian crochet, I would definitely recommend checking out some beginner videos first. To get started, you want to take your yarn and make a slip knot. Next you want to insert your hook. And then do as many chains as you need to make the band of your glove. Now this is going to vary depending on the size of the glove that you're making, and you will also need to bear in mind that Tunisian crochet does tend to shrink in a bit as you build up the rows, so you want to make more than you would normally do. I would definitely recommend doing a test swatch first here. And next you're going to work along picking up loops, but instead of fastening off your stitch each time here like you would do for a double crochet or a treble crochet, you want to pick up loops all along the chain but leave them on the hook. So you're going to yarn over and pick up, and yarn over and pick up, yarn over and pick up, and you're just going to do this until you get to the end of your chain. And once you pull through your last loop, you're going to end up with something that looks like this. So a bit like knitting, you're going to have all of your loops on the hook. But unlike knitting, you're now going to work the other half of your stitches and remove them. So you're going to yarn over and pull through, and then you want to yarn over and pull through 2 stitches. And then yarn over again and pull through 2 stitches. Then yarn over and pull through 2. And you want to repeat this until you get back to the end of the row and you've only got 1 loop left on your hook. Once you get to the end of your first row, you'll end up with something that looks like this. So you've got a little post at the front and you've also got a little post at the back. I'm not sure how well this shows up on camera, but you'll be able to see it on your own work. So to start off I'm going to do the band, and for this I'm going to do in the Tunisian knit stitch for the first stitch, and instead of going through and doing the simple stitch, you see you've got a loop at the back and a loop at the front. You would normally work a simple stitch like this. But this one's a little bit more complex. You're going to go through the first half as you would with a simple stitch, but then you're going to work your hook to the back of your work. And then for the next stitch, you're going to find the loop that's at the back, but you don't want to put it through the one at the front. So you want to hook it through the back one, sort of as a reversed simple stitch. And then you're going to go back to doing the knit stitch. And then you're going to work into the back loop only, and do a back loop stitch, and then a knit stitch. And you want to do this all along your row to make your band. Each time just alternating with a back loop stitch and a Tunisian knit stitch. And once you get to the end, you want to secure through the post at the end for your last stitch. So you want to make sure you've got both sides of the yarn over your hook, and then you want to yarn over and pull through. And you'll end up again with something that looks like this. And if you measure this against your wrist here, you're going to see that it is massive. But the thing is, as I said before with Tunisian crochet, it does shrink as you work it, so you do want to make it quite big to begin with. So to finish off your row, you're going to yarn over and pull through 1, and then yarn over and pull through 2, and then yarn over and pull through 2, and then just repeat this until you get back to the beginning of your row with just 1 loop on your hook. When you get to the end of the row, you'll end up with something that looks like this, and you might be able to see the pattern starting to take shape at the bottom. And if you measure this round your wrist now, you might notice that it started to get a little bit smaller. It's still fairly big, but obviously I'm doing a little band at the end here as well, but it will continue to shrink for a couple of rows. So now you want to continue and do what you did with your first row by doing a Tunisian knit stitch for your first stitch, and then working the back loop for your second stitch, and then repeating this pattern till you get to the end of your row. Once you've done as many rows as you want for your beginning part, you're going to end up with something that looks like this. So now you can measure it against your wrist. And here you also want to measure it against the widest part of your hand, because Tunisian crochet isn't very stretchy. In fact, there's hardly any stretch in it at all. So you can mark the point where it meets the other end of your fabric. See how it doesn't stretch there? And then mark off how many stitches that was. And then you can use a stitch marker just to remember. So now you can do the next part of your glove. So for this I'm just going to do Tunisian simple stitch, and I'm going to do simple stitches until I get to the stitch marker. So to do these, you just work in the front of the post. So rather than going through like you have been doing before, you're just working your hook into the front, keeping the back loop behind your hook, and then just pulling a loop through. And then repeat this for your next stitch, and then just keep doing this until you get to your stitch marker. So once you get to your stitch marker, in the last stitch before the marker, you want to do a knit stitch here. Instead of doing a simple stitch like I have been doing it, do a knit stitch. I just find this makes the edges tidier. So you're going to treat that as the end of your row and ignore this little tab at the end. So you're going to yarn over and pull through 1, and then yarn over and pull through 2. And then you want to repeat this back down to the beginning of your row until you've only got 1 loop left on your hook. When you get to the end of the row, it should look like this. You won't be able to tell the difference straight away, but as you do a few more rows, you will see a difference in the pattern. So you want to go along your next row, just doing simple stitch again, so just working into the front loop until you get to the end of the row. Once you've done a few rows of simple stitch, you should notice that it starts to look a little bit different at the top than it did at the bottom. So now you want to try and work out where you want to add your increases. So you want to be working, discounting the band about halfway up as it starts to get wider. So for me this was 6 rows, but it may vary for you depending on the size of the glove you're making. So next you want to mark off the amount of stitches you're going to need for your thumb, bearing in mind that you want half at one side and half at the other. And again, the amount that you need will vary depending on the size of the glove you're making. For me, I'm marking off 5 stitches at either side, but you may need more or less. So now you want to work your increases. And to do this, you're going to do 4 simple stitches as normal. When you get to your 5th stitch, you want to pick up a stitch here. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your hook through the gap in between the stitches, and then you want to pick up the back stitch. Try not to catch the yarn as I've just done. You're going to pick up the back of the stitch and then work that as a loop. And then you want to go into the front of your stitch like a normal simple stitch. And you'll see that you've added an extra loop onto the hook there. This can be quite tricky when you're first starting out. That's why it does help if you've got a stitch marker through the front of your loop. And then you want to work the rest of your stitches as normal until you get to the other side where you're going to add another increase. When you get to your next stitch marker, you want to repeat what you did the first time, so working through the gap. You want to pick up the back of the stitch but not the front part, and then work a loop, and then work through the front of your stitch. And this has created another extra loop on your hook. Now you can remove the stitch marker and then work the rest of your row as normal. So you won't notice it increasing straight away, but as you work more increases you will. So you're working back along the row as you normally would. Once you've done your first row of increases, you want to repeat what you did for that. So working into the 5th or however many stitches it is for you on one side and then on the other side. If you mark them off, it just helps you from accidentally going over them. And you want to repeat this for as many rows as you need increases for. For me, I want to add 10 loops to the hook altogether, so that's 5 rows because it's 2 increases per row. How many you do will vary depending on the size of the glove that you're making. Once you've done the increases that you need, you'll notice it starts to flare outwards. It should look something like this. So once again, you want to mark off the spot where you did your increases and then mark this with a stitch marker. And this time, once you get to your stitch marker, what you're going to do is you're going to start the beginning of your row for your fingers. So instead of doing a simple stitch, you want to work through and do one Tunisian knit stitch. And then mark the first stitch of this new row. And then you want to work along to your next stitch marker as normal. And once you get to the stitch before your stitch marker, you want to once again work this as a knit stitch rather than a simple stitch. And this is going to be the end of your next row. So you want to yarn over and pull through one, and then yarn over and pull through two, and then repeat this until you get back to the beginning and you've only got one loop left. And here the beginning means back to your stitch marker. So you keep in these 5 loops on the hook. These are going to get worked later for your thumb. So now you can do simple stitch back along the row, keeping those 5 loops on the hook. You can use a long stitch marker here if you want to, but just to show it can be done, I'm just going to leave on the hook for now. And once you work back to your next stitch marker, that is the end of your row. So you don't want to continue with the next part, so that's your thumb. So you want to yarn over, pull through one, and then yarn over and pull through two until you get back to just having one loop on your hook. And back to the beginning, you should have one loop left on your hook, not including the ones that you're saving for your thumb later. So you can work back along the row and you can repeat this step until you've got as many rows as you want to make it as long as you need it for your fingers. And once you've done as many rows as you need, you'll end up with something that looks like this. Now the top row always looks a little bit gappy here, so to fasten this off nicely, what I usually do is I'll work a simple stitch, but then instead of going over the next loop, I will finish it off as a double crochet. And I do this until I get to the end of the row. Once you get to the end of the row, you can bring your two ends together and then fasten them together by using a slip stitch. So work your loop through the beginning stitch on the row and then just pull through. And this is the point where it can be handy if you've got one of those big stitch markers. I do have one, but just to show how you can do it if you don't have one, I'm going to use a separate hook here. So now you want to seam the ends together. And you do this by working your crochet hook through both edges and then slip stitching. And then you just want to work down along both sides, and each time you're making a slip stitch. Now you can do this on the inside if you want the seam more hidden, but I actually like it better on the outside as a little bit of an extra detail. And you want to do this until you get to the part where your thumb needs working. you should end up with something like this for the first seam. So you can remove the other crochet hook, and then you can re-add your stitch back onto your other crochet hook, onto your Tunisian one. So to do this, you're going to create the stitch by pulling the loop through the next stitch in your sequence. It's a bit hard to explain this, but hopefully it's showing up enough on camera for you. So you create the stitch, and then you move to the other side, and then you work through the other last stitch, and then you're back to working through your last 5 loops. So you're just going to work these as normal. And then you're going to treat this as any other regular row. So you'll see it's joined together now, and you're just going to work the rest of your thumb by doing as many rows as you need here, depending on the size of the glove you're making. So from now on, you're just going to be working this row as though it's a normal row, just going along and doing simple stitches all the way until the end. And then you want to yarn over, pull through 1, and then pull through 2 until you get back to the beginning. And then just do this, as I said, for as many rows as you need to make the thumb as you want, as big as you want it. So once you've got the thumb part as long as you want it, you can fasten off the same way you did before. So you're going to work it as a simple stitch and then fasten off as a double crochet. And do this until you get to the end of your row. Once you've finished the thumb part, you want to slip stitch them together by working your hook into the first stitch at the beginning of the row and then slip stitching them together. I'm going to take the hook that I used for the first seam here just so that it'll be nice and consistent, and I'm going to do this seam the same way as I did the last one, by working down each of the stitches at the side and then slip stitching together. And you want to do this all the way down to where the band starts. So once you got down to the band, you'll remember that there's a few stitches along the band that you didn't complete last time. So what you want to do is pull your loop through to the other side of your band. So you can insert your hook and then just pull the loop through. Then you want to work your first stitch as a knit stitch, pull your yarn through and then slip stitch through. And this just fastens it off. And then you want to work your back loop and then slip stitch. And then your knit stitch, and again slip stitch to fasten, and then work your last loop and slip stitch to fasten. Next you want to work along the edge of your band, so you want to do a double crochet and then another double crochet. Now I'm going to chain 3, and how many you need will vary depending on the size of the button you're using. And I want to skip one stitch and then double crochet to the end of the row. Now I'm going to chain 1 and turn. Now I want to do 2 double crochet, and next I'm going to work 5 double crochet into the loop I created. You're just working into the gap you created with your 3 or however many chains you did. And then 2 double crochet and fasten off. And this creates your loop for your button. So you can snip your wool and then pull it through. So next you want to weave in any tail ends. So take your darning or yarn needle, thread it with the yarn, and just weave it in along the back of your work. And lastly you want the buttons that you're going to use to fasten on your gloves. As you position it so you make sure that it's going to be in the right place when it's sewn on, you can take your sewing needle and then just sew it onto the glove. You probably won't be able to use your darning needle here unless your buttonholes are particularly large. And then repeat this for the other glove. Once that's done, you can try on your gloves. You will note these are a little bit on the large side for me, but that's because I've made them for somebody else. And that's your completed Tunisian crochet fingerless gloves.